London, a global titan, its economy a behemoth worth more than $500 billion. If this city were a country, it would possess the 26th largest economy on earth, an engine of wealth rivaling that of Norway. For nearly 2 centuries, it has stood as Europe's great hub of finance, a place of high ambition and higher wages. But beneath this gleaming facade of prosperity, a different reality festers. In the year 2023, city councils estimated that more than 1 in every 50 people here is homeless. It is a staggering figure, one that has surged by over 50% in just 10 years, pushing Britain to the highest level of homelessness in the developed world. This crisis unfolds against a backdrop of economic paralysis. For over 15 years, real wages, what people actually take home after the relentless bite of inflation, have remained stagnant. The paycheck of today buys no more than it did in 2008, while the cost of everything, from daily goods to the essential sanctuary of a home, has skyrocketed. It is little wonder, then, that an exodus is underway. A junior professional in London, looking across the Atlantic, can see a salary in New York more than double what they earn, for a cost of living only around 1/3 higher. And so, year after year, the country bleeds its future. Britain's young, its skilled, its most promising minds are leaving in search of a life elsewhere. Nowhere is this hollowing out more acute than in the nation's famed National Health Service. A potential exodus of doctors and nurses looms, driven out by poor pay, crushing workloads, and deteriorating conditions. The steady stream of talent flowing out of the United Kingdom has become a stark metaphor for the state of its economy. And yet, there is a paradox. As its own citizens depart, more people are immigrating to Britain than ever before. While many are drawn by the nation's world-leading universities, a study from 2015 revealed a troubling imbalance. Those leaving the country were found to be significantly more skilled than those arriving. The net result of this exchange over the last decade has been a dramatic increase in the pool of low-skilled workers, a trade-off that inevitably leads to lower productivity and a decline in the quality of goods and services for everyone. The question, then, is why? Why would a country of such apparent wealth watch as its most valuable assets walk away? The answer is not found in spreadsheets or market reports, but in the lived experience of millions. It is the slow, grinding erosion of a fundamental promise that hard work will be rewarded, that tomorrow will be better than today. When that promise is broken, a nation's wealth becomes an illusion, and its people begin to search for a new horizon. To comprehend the modern United Kingdom, one must first imagine it without London. If the capital's output and population were to be erased from the national ledger, British living standards would plummet by 14%. The remaining nation would find itself economically weaker than Mississippi, the lowest-ranking state in the American Union. This is more than a statistic. It is the anchor for a growing, unsettling theme, that the nation's best days are now a memory. The data tells a story of a slow, almost imperceptible drift. In 2007, the average British household was just 8% less prosperous than its peers in northwestern Europe. In the 15 years that followed, that gap has widened into a chasm, now a record 20%. The trajectory suggests a fundamental reordering of the old world. On present trends, the average Slovenian household will be better off than its British counterpart by 2024. The average Polish family is set to achieve the same milestone by the close of the decade. This stagnation of wages is not a burden shared equally. It is a pressure that bears down disproportionately on those with the least. While the United Kingdom's top earners rank 5th for living standards among their international peers, the average household languishes at 12th. The poorest 5% fall to 15th. For them, the nation has not simply lost touch with its Western European neighbors. It has fallen behind the new Europe. Last year, the lowest earning bracket of British households endured a standard of living 20% weaker than their counterparts in Slovenia. And within this story of decline, a deep paradox is taking root. As more and more people continue to arrive in the United Kingdom, the very pillars of its public life, its services, its pools of skilled workers, appear to be in a state of gradual, inexorable decay. The nation is left to confront a difficult question. What becomes of a country when the promise it offers the world begins to erode from within? Not so long ago, Britain was a destination, a magnet for the world's young and skilled. It is a sentiment echoed by the British themselves. A recent poll found that 60% of the public view life as better in the 1990s and 2000s than it is today. That era, in particular, is bathed in the warm glow of nostalgia. Tack, as a cultural wave known as Cool Britannia, swept the nation. The end of the Cold War had injected a potent optimism into the air, a sense that history was moving in the right direction. While the past is often seen through a flattering lens, the 1990s stand apart as a period of genuine economic triumph for Great Britain. After a turbulent start to the decade, marked by the fallout of a currency crisis and a biting recession, the United Kingdom entered an era of remarkable resilience. From 1992 onward, Britain embarked on its longest period of uninterrupted growth since the Second World War. This long expansion was powered by a confluence of forces: deep structural reforms, deft monetary policy, and favorable global tailwinds. It was an age of continuous GDP growth and soaring productivity. At the heart of this success was the financial sector. A vast expansion of credit, especially in property lending, fueled a surge in consumer spending and investment. Regulatory changes transformed the UK into a uniquely attractive haven for capital, ensuring a positive balance of income from abroad. But beneath the gleaming surface of this new service-based economy, a profound shift was underway. The prosperity did not provide the broad-based employment of the industrial age it was replacing. In the country's former industrial heartlands, far from the glittering towers of London, The silence of shuttered factories and dormant coal mines told a different story. Widespread job losses carved deep scars into communities built on heavy industry. As the nation crossed into the new millennium, growth continued. Yet, by the mid-2000s, foundational cracks were beginning to appear. The global financial crisis of 2008 did not create these weaknesses. It exposed them with brutal efficiency, revealing an economy dangerously over-reliant on the very financial engine that had propelled its ascent. A nation's memory is selective, often choosing the melody of a bygone summer over the dissonant hum of the machine that drove it. It is a reminder that even in a golden age, the seeds of future hardship are often sown quietly just beneath the surface. A nation finds itself stretched to a breaking point. Its cherished public services, its aging infrastructure, the very foundations of its post-war promise are groaning under the weight of decades of neglect and miscalculation. But beneath it all lies a more fundamental crisis, one that reaches into every town and city, defining the lives of millions, the crisis of home. The dream of ownership, once a cornerstone of British life, has become a privilege reserved for the few. For a new generation, the path to a first home is all but impassable without an income far exceeding the national average or the direct financial intervention of their parents. A society is emerging where the key to your own front door is no longer earned, but inherited. This reality should come as no surprise. For decades, the United Kingdom has failed to build. A chronic shortfall in construction, hobbled by restrictive planning laws and a retreat from state-funded public housing, has created a deep and ever-widening chasm between the number of homes needed and the number that actually exist. The roots of this imbalance run deep, back to a pivotal policy decision in the late 1970s. The Right to Buy scheme was presented as a grand act of empowerment, allowing tenants in public housing to purchase their homes at a significant discount. It was a policy that created a new class of homeowners overnight, but it came with a profound and ultimately devastating hidden cost. The homes sold were almost never replaced. As the population grew, the nation's stock of social housing began to hemorrhage. Since the 1970s, it has shrunk by an estimated 25%. With this vital safety net dismantled, millions were funneled into the private rental sector. The consequences were inevitable. As demand surged, the supply of rental properties could not keep pace, and rents began an inexorable climb. This has placed an unbearable burden on those with the lowest incomes, forcing them into fierce competition for an ever-dwindling number of affordable properties. Compounding the crisis for well over 30 years, the relentless rise of house prices has dwarfed the growth of real wages, cleaving society between those who own and those who are locked out. While housing supply is a challenge across Western Europe, the situation in the United Kingdom is exceptionally severe. In England today, there are 1.4 million fewer households in social housing than there were just a few decades ago. A home is more than bricks and mortar. It is the bedrock of stability, the anchor of community, and the tangible promise of a stake in the future. When that foundation crumbles, a nation is forced to ask not only where its people will live, but what kind of society it is destined to become. A quiet dismantling has been underway since 1980. While the nation's wealth has grown, the very fabric of its social safety net has frayed. Fewer homes stand in the public trust, even as the Gini coefficient, the stark mathematical measure of inequality, has climbed relentlessly upwards. The consequence is a crisis that unfolds behind closed doors, in overcrowded rooms and strained households. It is a homelessness not of the streets, but of cramped, transient spaces. Between 2010 and 2023, the number of English households adrift in this limbo more than doubled, from 48,000 to a staggering 112,000, the highest figure since records began. Here, in these forgotten buildings, the air is thick with damp and decay. Mold creeps across the walls, a silent testament to neglect, while infestations of insects and vermin become a part of daily life. The human cost is incalculable. Lives are unmoored. Adults, shuttled from one temporary address to another, lose their foothold in the world of work. Children, their education fractured, fall behind. The ladder of social mobility is pulled away, just out of reach. The financial toll is immense. Local councils, the last line of defense, spent nearly $1.8 billion on emergency shelter last year alone, a figure that has more than doubled in real terms over the past decade. This national nightmare is born of a toxic confluence of failures, a chronic, decades-long inadequacy in house building, the systematic erosion of the social housing sector, and the withering away of financial support for those priced out of the market. And it is the young who bear the heaviest burden. A great chasm has opened between the generations. While a significant portion of their elders own not one, but two homes, today's young adults find even a single front door an impossible dream. They are a generation of renters, caught in a brutal economic paradox, wages that barely move, set against asset values that soar into the stratosphere. Slower economic growth means fewer chances to advance, stalling careers at their most critical early stages. The fundamental promise of modern life, that each generation will surpass the last, appears to have been broken. Those born in the 1980s by their early 30s had earned less than their parents' generation at the same age. Trapped, with home ownership a fantasy and wages in decline, it is little wonder that the nation's brightest are now looking for an exit. A quiet exodus is underway as ambitious workers seek futures in America, Australia, or New Zealand, lands that still seem to offer a quality of life their own country can no longer provide. The engine behind this stagnation is a national decline in productivity, the very measure of a country's efficiency and ingenuity. When a nation ceases to build not just homes, but futures, it begins to consume itself. The question that remains is not simply one of economics, but of identity. What becomes of a society when the dream of a better tomorrow is no longer a shared inheritance, but a fading memory? It is the engine of a nation's prosperity, the efficiency with which it turns labor and capital into goods and services, and since the great financial crisis of 2008, the United Kingdom has confronted a stark reality. Its engine has stalled. Before the crisis, productivity was climbing at a steady 2% each year. Afterwards, that growth nearly flatlined. The cause, buried in the data, is a profound and prolonged drought of investment. Since 2005, British companies have invested 20% less than their counterparts in the United States, France, and Germany, a figure that places the nation in the bottom 10% of OECD countries. The consequences have been corrosive: a legacy of outdated technology and aging equipment, a chilling effect on innovation, a shortfall in the skills needed to compete. Across every sector, from the factory floor to the financial district, the economy's capacity to evolve has been diminished, its productivity hobbled, and nowhere is this national malaise more painfully clear than in the institution charged with the nation's health. The National Health Service. Established in 1948, it was a radical promise born from the ashes of war, a publicly funded service free for all at the point of access. For over 70 years, it became a fixture of British life, an assumed certainty. But in the last 2 decades, the promise has begun to fray. Costs are spiraling, while the quality of care declines. The Britain of its founding was a smaller, younger nation, with fewer people in need of treatment. Today, even as taxes rise to record levels, the system is buckling. The number of people waiting for consultant treatment more than doubled in the 9 years after 2014, climbing from 3 million to a staggering 7.4 million. The data reveals a darker truth. Patients treated by the NHS for heart disease, strokes, or cancer have lower survival rates compared to those in most other developed nations. In 2014, the UK had the lowest survival rates among comparable countries for colon and pancreatic cancers. It would be easy to assume this is a simple story of underfunding. While partly true, the reality is far more complex. Since 2019, the NHS has seen a significant increase in both funding and staff. In 2023, its funding was 11% higher in real terms than just 4 years prior. The number of senior doctors has risen by 9%. There are 8% more nurses and health visitors, even after accounting for higher staff absences. More money, more people, and yet the system is failing. The crisis, it seems, is not merely one of scarcity. It is a crisis of function, a deep and troubling question of whether a system designed for a world that no longer exists can ever truly be healed by money alone. A demographic tide, decades in the making, is washing over the nation. An aging population living longer requires more care. This care, in turn, is being transformed by new technologies and treatments, each carrying a formidable price tag. The cost of pharmaceuticals climbs relentlessly, while a public, quite rightly, expects a higher standard of care than ever before. In the background, the drumbeat of inflation grows louder. Staff, the very backbone of the health service, seek wages that reflect a rising cost of living. This confluence of pressures has a name: health inflation. It is a financial treadmill where even increased funding is consumed just to stand still. More resources arrive, but they are swallowed by the surging maintenance costs of a system under strain. There is little, if anything, left to invest in the long-term capacity of the service, as money is diverted to cover the immediate daily pressures of operation. This is not a crisis confined to the wards and waiting rooms. It is a symptom of a wider national malady. A pattern of underinvestment stretches across the country's essential infrastructure. From transportation to public services, the story is the same: a struggle against decay, leading to chronic inefficiency and a decline in the quality of life. Nowhere is this paralysis more starkly illustrated than in the ghost of an ambition known as HS2. It was a grand vision, conceived in 2009, a high-speed rail network to bind the north and south of England closer together. Yet, it would take another 11 years for the first ground to be broken in 2020. By then, the projected cost had metastasized, swelling from an initial £37 billion to a staggering figure north of $100 billion. It became a monument not to connection, but to indecision, before being largely abandoned in 2023. Looming over this landscape is the profound and complicating factor of Brexit. The decision in 2016 to leave the European Union undeniably reconfigured the nation's economic fortunes, diminishing trade with its largest partner. Yet, it is not the sole author of this decline. Many of the hardships Britain faces are mirrored in other European economies. The country's brain drain, the quiet exodus of its skilled and ambitious, is driven by a host of factors: a search for new opportunities and the pursuit of a quality of life that feels increasingly precarious at home. The roots of this predicament run deep, back to the prevailing philosophy of the 1990s. A focus on immediate economic gains driven by privatization often came at the expense of long-term strategic planning. The promise was one of efficiency and dynamism. The reality, however, was a slow erosion of the foundational investments that a nation needs to thrive. A country's future is not built on the balance sheets of a single quarter, but on the bedrock of its infrastructure, the health of its people, and the reach of its ambitions. When the focus narrows to only the immediate, the horizon itself begins to shrink, leaving a legacy not of what was built, but of what was allowed to fade away. The vast capital required for infrastructure renewal, once promised, instead became a catalyst for a creeping neglect. As private enterprise took the helm, the relentless logic of the balance sheet charted a new course, one where the maximization of profit eclipsed the patient work of reinvestment and long-term improvement. Now, the bill for that era has come due. The United Kingdom is reckoning with a legacy of underinvestment, a hollowing out of the very systems upon which a modern state depends. And as the political tides shift, the sheer scale of this inheritance becomes starkly clear. The prospect of new leadership offers no swift remedy, for the timeline of decay cannot be reversed in a single term. The path to restoration is not a sprint, but a generational marathon. It stands as a profound lesson that the true wealth of a nation is not merely extracted for the present, but is carefully stewarded for the future.